We're going to look at Standard 5, Part 1, Teachers Analyze Student Learning. As teachers, we all get frustrated at times when there are select students who just don't seem to get it, and we feel like we've tried everything. We've looked at the data from state tests and benchmarks, and we've talked to our peers who have had that student in class before, and we're just not getting answers as to how to reach that student. And yet we believe this student really can learn, but it's just not showing. We haven't figured out what it is. So this is where some extra analysis comes in. This is where it's important. So overall, what we want to do is to connect the changes that we make as individual teachers to the whole school and to the system. We want to find ways that we improve our practices so that we improve our students' growth. When we individually improve our practices and share these techniques and these findings with our peers, then we find that there's this systemic growth. The school is improving as a whole. Its individual students are realizing growth, and gaps are being closed, and that's what we're really seeking to do. So one practice that teachers can change is in the assumptions that we make about certain students. We're all human, and sometimes we look at certain students as either lazy, or we look at where they've come from and say, well, the parents don't really appreciate education very much because they never come out to open house or the things we have at school, or he's just a troublemaker. So we look at these things and we assume then that those are the things that are getting in the way, and that maybe we just can't make a difference with the teaching and with the things that we do, that somehow inherently this student is just a troublemaker or a lazy kid or from a home that, does not appreciate education very much. We have to change those assumptions. What we need to do to get ourselves away from these assumptions and letting those assumptions block that kid's progress is to find some kind of diagnostic that will tell us more. We cannot rely just on the state tests and the benchmarks that we give. The problem with some of those is that they give sort of an overall result, a comprehension score or a vocabulary score, for instance, when it comes to reading. Comprehension and vocabulary are standard things that we get the information about. But what we have to do is to find some way to determine, well, why isn't the student getting the vocabulary? Why isn't the student getting the comprehension? There are things that affect those, such as fluency, such as lack of background knowledge about something, such as word identification, sound decoding. And all of these will affect that student's ability to comprehend and to use words appropriately and to derive meaning. And so what we need to do then is to ask our area specialists in reading to get us some kind of diagnostic tool so that we can determine what is behind that student's not making progress in the area of vocabulary or in the area of comprehension. When you find out exactly what skills that student has and what skills that student does not have, you then want to use some kind of spreadsheet or database or some way of tracking. And so now every time you are teaching that student, because that's what we do, we want to think of ourselves as teaching students. We're not teaching a course. When you are teaching that student, you have some very, very specific skills now that you are working on with that student. And in the preparation of your lesson plan, you are making a very, very custom designed lesson for that student based on what you found out from that diagnosis. Um, we should think of this very much the way we do an IEP for students who have special needs. Once we get this information and we write it up in some capacity that other teachers can use, then that's when it becomes usable and to the student's advantage. All teachers will say, oh, this is what's going on in Mrs. Brown's classroom, and this is how she's been able to reach him by doing this, this, and this. This brings about system changes. More teachers knowing more information about the students, and closing the gaps because of these special skill sets that we are helping that student to develop on a very routine basis. Like every single day, this student is doing a set of exercises that increase the student's ability in terms of fluency, that increase that student's ability to call on previous information. So it builds up their background knowledge skills, word identification skills, and sound decoding. That's in reading. Let's talk a little bit about math, for instance. We could do this for every subject, but let's just do reading and math for now. Let's just say we have a student who's having difficulty in math. Some of the things that are behind students' difficulties in mathematics are things that we can practice on an everyday basis outside of math class. There are things that you can share with parents to do at home. Children who have problems in math many times are children who just routinely in any subject area, in any kind of task, have problems remembering facts, have problems with steps toward problem solving. Okay, so let's just say the parent gives them a task, something they need them to figure out, but the child does not process putting things in order. So that's something that, if you bring that awareness to the parents, they can start working on that at home. Students who have problems in math have difficulty many times with complex rules. So that is something that teachers in every discipline can help that student with. So you share that information if you find out that that's one of the problem areas. They have students understanding the meaning of facts, or the meaning of operations, or the meaning of formulas. Many times there are students who are having trouble understanding why things must be done in order. Again, something that parents can help you with if you bring this to their attention, because they can set up opportunities for that child to develop those skills in regular tasks in the home. Students who have difficulty in math many times have trouble following multi-step directions or instructions. And so you'd start out with maybe 2 instructions at a time. Okay? I would like for you to go to the cubby and get your basket, and when you come back, open your book to page 46. And then maybe the next time you add something, go to your cubby, get your basket, open your book to page 46, and do problems 3 through 7. And so it's one of those things that we can teach students to do a little at a time. And when the student develops those skills, they can then apply that toward math as well. Many times students who are failing in math have problems with their handwriting, and so we can begin to work with increasing their accuracy in forming their numbers and letters, so that their answers that they put on homework assignments and tests are actually seen as the right answer, because many times the student may feel like it's the right answer, but the teacher is not able to see it because it's illegible. And so sometimes the handwriting is getting in the way, their inability to form their letters and numbers correctly. Sometimes it's about making logical determinations, teaching students to use logic. Again, something that can be done across disciplines and can be done outside of the school. But parents should be made aware that if they help you with this at home, giving students, giving their children the opportunity to use logic, to think and make a logical determination about whether something will work or not, or whether something should be done this way or not, based on some information. The student will then begin to apply that because that's how the brain works. Many times there are students who have difficulty recalling and using prior information. That can be done across all disciplines. It can be done outside of school. So riding in the car, having children to think back and tell stories about their holidays when they were 5 years old. Maybe that's digging back 5 years. That is practice that the brain needs to support the kinds of activities that students do in math using prior information. Sometimes it's a matter of choosing the right strategy for a situation. Okay, so we know that students need to do that in math, but they also need to do that in so many situations outside of mathematics. So again, something that all of the students, teachers, all of these teachers could be aware of, that you're working on this. If they would work on this same thing in their disciplines and the parents are working on this at home, we will begin to see some differences in how that child's brain operates when it comes to mathematics and needing that strategy of choosing the right strategy. And finally, I've listed here finding one's own mistakes. That's important. And in mathematics, of course, we always ask them to double check or triple check their work. And we want them to do it with a sense of intentionality so that they're not just they're just kind of looking it over. You want them to really be able to go back through the steps of the problem as if they're doing it for the first time and say, "Ooh, I got that wrong," giving themselves that opportunity to correct it, which means they still have to have developed many of these other skills, okay, of the complex rules and understanding the meaning and following multi-step directions and using logic and choosing the right strategy. All goes into finding one's own mistakes. And all of these can be practiced outside of mathematics and should be practiced by all of those teachers who have that student, so that it strengthens that skill set in that child. This concludes this talk on some ways that we can help students by analyzing their learning in a very, very finite sort of way to determine skill sets that need to be strengthened in order to help that student achieve the kind of success they need to achieve, and helping schools to close gaps.